there.
Hello there.
Welcome to the channel again.
Thank you again.
We had the first interview. You were my first live interview where I was filming with my camera and I didn't know something about my camera. It can only do 20-minute recordings at a stretch.
Oh, okay.
So I was thinking, because I was thinking about half an hour. So I was thinking about half an hour, and we got into the most interesting part of your interview, and I didn't even realize the camera was off because I'm
Maybe there was
that
maybe there's a reason for that.
I'm that talented. I can screw up that weird a way. So this is your part two of your interview.
Okay.
And so I want to ask you about, let's start with the photography. How about that?
All right.
When you first got assigned, or when you first started teaching photography, was that part of yearbook or was it a separate course or how did that work?
Well, I did yearbook and newspaper at the same time that first year, and it was more part of yearbook than it was newspaper, although we used it in newspaper too. But everything that went into the yearbook, and of course we had deadlines all the time, um, had to be photographed and developed in the darkroom. Um, and so, I just jumped in with both feet, didn't know what I was doing. Thank goodness the students were very tolerant of me that first year. I had to keep one step in front of them
Yeah.
if that
Yeah.
was possible. So
Yeah.
I did a lot of crash courses and all kinds of stuff in order to be able, and I had never done darkroom work before.
Wow.
And so yeah, I had to do a lot of searching. And I took some classes out at Eastern too that also helped me learn, and then I could teach them.
Oh, that's awesome. That's smart. That's smart. I think, you know what I found when I took classes while I was teaching, I think I was a better teacher. If Because it was like an automatic sense of what it was like to be sitting in the room with somebody and trying to learn from them.
Right.
And you start to realize things like every once in a while a teacher forgets students can't read minds. So, so you ask a question and you don't realize, wow, this question is really tricky.
Yeah.
But if you're a student and that happens, you go, oh, okay. Is
Yeah.
there a way I can make this easier? Is there a way I can do this?
Right. And some of the hurdles that you run into while you're a student, they also run into, but you've already gone through them. So it that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that must have started. Were you expecting to love it as much as you do?
No, not really. I mean, I always was interested in photography, and I've drawn and painted and all that kind of stuff. So I've done art type things, but I love the dark room. I mean, I love the dark room. You can lose yourself in the dark room. And it's
Uh-huh.
too bad they don't have dark rooms anymore, most of the places. So, but, and a lot of the kids actually found that out too, that they could lose themselves in the dark room.
And
And
just
it's magical seeing their blank paper, and then all of a sudden this picture forms on the paper, and you're like, oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you immediately start thinking about, okay, what can I do with this? What other things can I try like this and stuff like
Right.
that? It
Right.
almost
And you try experimenting with different techniques. And I mean, just one thing leads into another. And like I said, when we first started, everything was developed in the dark room. You didn't send out film for anything, you had to do it all. And
yeah.
so, yeah,
So it was a lot. You did a
it
lot
was
of
fun.
teaching and a lot of learning.
Yes. And plus, I had jury duty that first semester. Yeah. So it was like, oh, really? Let's see how much you can pile on me. But I survived. I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, We did talk about your technique of saying to a student, does it, is it good enough for you? Which I think
Right.
is maybe one of the best techniques I've ever seen. I think it's wonderful. Um, so, so yearbook. Let's start with the yearbook, that publication. Had you done yearbook at all before? Did
Oh,
you do it in high school?
never. No,
Never.
no, never.
Wow.
No.
And you also went to the conventions in the summer too, didn't you? Or
Yes.
the
And
thingy?
I took some students with me. Yeah.
Did that help?
Yes, it did. Yeah. Well, because I was clueless. So anything would have helped. But yes, it did. It helped me and it helped them also. So
Well,
they
I thought the yearbooks were beautiful. I loved them. You know me. I loved them. But I've always loved yearbooks. Even from the time I was a little kid, I liked them. I would look at my dad's yearbooks,
right.
from the high school. He would always buy a yearbook from the high school, and I would go through it meticulously. Even like in second grade, I was checking it out. So,
Well, one of the things that I did learn at the workshops is that first year that I was there to do yearbooks, it was mostly pictures. And later, I mean, even if you bought a yearbook 5, 10 years down the road, you look at that and you're going, what was going on? And I mean, it was just pictures and maybe names that maybe that
right,
were under the pictures. So I did learn we implemented some storylines and a little bit of prose to go along with the images. So you would at least know what was going on and it might trigger a memory. Whereas just looking at the pictures, even though that was awesome too, but as you get older and you're farther away, you look back and you're going, oh, I don't remember what was going on here. And
right,
so we started adding more writing to,
yeah,
and it had to be a balance because too much writing is, you know, people don't want to read it. But
right.
you got to put enough in there to just spur the memory a little bit, but also the picture tells the story. And that's what I had to emphasize too. Your picture has to tell the story, but it also helps to have a little bit of writing with it.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
one of the things, I eventually got to do yearbook. I
right,
eventually did get to do that. And one of the things I loved about it was because we used computers, by the time I was doing it, we were loading our images into the computer and processing it on the computer. But what I loved was we had a policy that every picture had to have a legend with it that said who was in it,
right,
right? And
right,
and so that every time we put a picture in, we were giving it context, and each spread had a little bit of context. It may just be, a couple of inches of prose,
right.
but they had context so that when you looked at that spread, you knew who was there and you knew what the focus was.
Right. And that was the deal. Of course, most high school students and a lot of us just like to look at the pictures. And that's fine as long as you are engaged at the time. But over time, you want more than just the pictures. And so, that's what
Yeah.
had to come about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved watching it, and I would always wander into your book. I was always, if my hour was off and your book was going, I was in there snooping.
Yeah. Well, it came in handy though when you did it yourself.
Oh man, so much. And of course, it's always nice to know, to watch students in invested in something like that. And boy, the day that yearbooks came, because I like that the yearbooks came before the end of the year. I
Right.
like that there was a yearbook delivery and everybody, they got their yearbooks and they were handing them around and looking at them and signing them. That to me was part of the magic.
Right.
But the feeling when you've made the yearbook and those boxes arrive and you open it up is so intense.
Right.
Not just for me, but for the students that made
Right.
it.
And you're
Man,
looking at all the, yes, you're doing, yep, that's true. It was a great day.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing that Orson, my nephew, noticed, he said, a lot of these things that they're doing for yearbook are actually really important skills. They're like useful job skills.
Right.
Things like keeping track of deadlines, keeping track of information, learning how to write a brief synopsis of what you're looking, all of that was
Right.
valuable. And of course, the computer work was very valuable because
Right.
now
Excuse me.
everything is on the computer.
Right. Well, eventually, we did go to the computer to all digital, and then we did digital photography. And even though we resisted, this is not photography, but it was just a different medium. But you're right. And then proofreading, because you had to make sure that the names uh, were the same in the index as they were under the pictures, and all the people were it was really the people that you said it was, and all that. So you couldn't just slap something together. It all took so much time
Yeah.
and timing and work on their part.
And they were never perfect. At least mine weren't.
No,
We could always almost immediately find a mistake.
right. Even though you went over them, I don't know, seemed like a billion times before you sent them into the publisher, but
Yeah.
somehow things just slipped through. That's,
Yeah.
yep,
That's an important lesson to learn. That's an important thing to learn about effort and about how things sometimes work, you know.
right.
Um,
Or
I think
don't.
think people assume that you look at it once and you can tell if there's a mistake. Well, yeah, if you see the mistake, sometimes you look at it and you don't see it. And
No,
that's so frustrating because you think, how could I have missed that?
right.
How could that happen? But
Well,
it's
it's the same thing with those, you see every once in a while something and it's all misspelled and all that kind of stuff, but you can read it anyway.
yeah,
Well, your brain does that too when you're proofreading a lot of times. It fills in what's not there, and you miss it.
yeah, yeah. And of course, the more challenging to avoid nightmares was newspaper because you only had a week, right? I mean,
Right.
you had a week to
Well,
get
they
out,
came out every 2 weeks, but yes, you had to get it to the printer and all that. Yes. And
and
had to
you,
interview people. Well, you did that for yearbook too, but not to the extent that you did for newspaper.
and when you took over newspaper, what did you discover?
Well, it was not news, and as far as I was concerned, it was a lot of fluff, I guess. And I it was thought it was my job to teach them news, and to have a balanced both sides type thing, and that you let the reader um, come to their own conclusions, but you provide the facts.
Right.
And I also found out that providing the facts sometimes can get you in trouble, and your students in trouble, because I didn't want to sugarcoat anything. I mean, if it was news, it was news, and it was, and I thought that they should. I mean, of course, they ran by ideas, and, well, what do you think about this story, or what do you think about that story? And a lot of times, I approved some of the stories that the administration wasn't glad that I approved. But, I thought as a teacher that I was teaching them skills that if they wanted to become a journalist, then they would have good skills to do that. And you can't do that if you sidetrack a lot of the issues. Yeah.
Well, and didn't you find that once you guys started telling real stories, the student body became much more interested.
Oh yes, they couldn't wait for the paper to come out to see what was in there, and they had to pay for it,
Yeah,
which was kind of amazing to me that they would put their money on their desk when we came through with the newspaper, and that helped us, pay for the newspaper. But they were actually interested in seeing what was in there,
right.
and sometimes it was stories that um, didn't even make the Roswell news. We covered them, and I got in so much trouble sometimes for allowing that. But, you know, to me, it was,
I can't remember them. Can you give me an example of one story? I know I was present for some of these nightmares.
well, there was one story about a student that sideswiped a car.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that?
I remember there's something about it, but the student had connections, right? In
Right.
town?
Well, the parent had connections. I don't know
Yeah.
if the student did or not. Yes. And so it was kept out of the main newspaper, but we published it in ours and spent lots of time in the principal's office. That was not okay. But
But there was nothing false in the article.
no, no, there wasn't. No, but you know, that's yeah. So anyway, we tried to find stories we thought the students would be interested in, of course, and they were interested in them because we didn't water them down, really.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right. Well, and you had I think there was a fight over a cartoon too, wasn't there?
oh yes, that was more time in the principal's office and a reporter from the Humane Society. Uh, well, it was a joke. It
Right.
was a joke in the Halloween edition, and it was about a cat, and it I thought it was hilarious, and the students thought it was hilarious, and I didn't really see any. I mean, it was a joke. Anybody reading it knew it was a joke,
Right.
except the people at the Humane Society. And so they sent a radio. Oh, it was quite the big uproar. Uh,
They
yeah,
sent somebody to report on it.
right.
Uh,
For the TV, yes. I mean, it was big news. It's like it's a joke, guys. Come on.
In a student newspaper. Try to
Right.
calm down.
I know. It's like chill.
But
Yeah.
what's interesting to me about that too, um, well, a lot of what you were doing was what we would now call old school
Right.
because it wasn't so there was no social media, there was no,
No.
no Facebook, none of that.
No.
What the yearbook and the newspaper were doing was old traditional stuff.
Right.
You guys even had, I think, word searches sometimes,
We did.
or
Yes. And
yeah,
and also that particular joke, we had an artist draw. I mean, they drew their own
right.
picture to go with the article. And yeah, it's I thought it was okay.
It's
I'm
fine.
gonna prove it again, but not so much.
Well, that's the other thing too that I think is one of the challenges. Even now, I think we're neither one in the game per se
Right,
anymore. But I'm betting that any publications teachers, that's one of the challenges because the Supreme Court says that the same freedom of speech that belongs to adults belongs to these school newspapers.
right. And
So,
actually a lesson that the editors and the assistant editors learned is I stood behind them. You know, I approved it. It was on me, but they saw all the trouble I got into, you know, and fighting for what they should have been able to put in the newspaper. And
right.
so And they were appreciative. You sometimes you don't give high school students enough credit, or people don't, but they were appreciative that somebody stood behind them and didn't back down and fought for them and that kind of thing. And they learned a good lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of good lessons.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that interests me about those experiences across time too, um, the one where the paper didn't print it, but the public paper didn't print it, but the high school paper did.
right,
I was surprised that that happened. But my mom was an editor of a small town paper. And I had talked to her about some of the things that you were going through at the time. And she'd said, um, uh, this is a very common thing that people who have power within a community will try to influence what goes in the paper. And it all depends on the editorial and publisher group.
right,
Because if the publisher kills it, the editorial group can't do anything about it. But
right,
if the publisher okays it, then the editorial group can run. And I think mom had some very difficult experiences in a small town with a small town newspaper, the same kind of thing,
right.
where you had what, 500 readers.
Yeah,
500. And yet still, if you're living in a small community like a school, even so, even if it's a small place, those things really matter to the people in that place.
right. And I think our the amount of issues that we published went up after that because people knew that they were trying to give us a hard time, and so the sympathies were more with us than with, of course, than the parents and all that kind and the principal. Oh my gosh, you know,
Right.
yeah. So
Well, that I think that's a I would like to talk to somebody other than that particular principal
yeah,
about how do you confront when parents overstep their authority within the community. They think they own the school because their kids go there.
right.
Interview derailed again.
Well, it's one of those kind of life lessons things that doesn't have to do with teaching, but it has to do with life
Yeah, and learning.
and learning.
You know, I'm I'm constant. She was my first teacher, really. She taught me so much, and she certainly taught my brother stuff too. She taught Daddy things.
I
Daddy used to spell yet, Y-E-A-T. And Mother would type his papers for college, and he had terrible spelling. And he had Y-E-A-T, and she'd go, that doesn't spell yet. And Daddy would say, well, what does it spell? It doesn't spell anything.
it's not a word. Oh, fun.
So eventually you weren't teaching newspaper anymore, right? Well, did you teach newspaper the whole time or no?
I'm trying to remember. I taught newspaper. I didn't teach yearbook. And then eventually I didn't teach newspaper. I don't I don't think they had a newspaper toward the end.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you did keep your photography classes.
Yes.
In
In the
fact, you ended up with two dark rooms rather than just one, right?
yes. Thanks to the people donating equipment to us because darkrooms were becoming a thing of the past. And I actually had three different photography classes. There was one, they had to do darkroom work first and learn how to manipulate a camera manually,
Right.
automatically, manually. So they had to learn how to create depth of field or, whatever they needed to. That was the first semester. Then they allowed me to teach uh, I don't know exactly. I would say maybe an advanced photography class where
Uh-huh.
they learn to paint their pictures and do things in the dark room, experimental type of things, special effects kind of
Right.
thing in the dark room. And then they were able to use. We eventually got digital cameras, and I was able to teach them Photoshop along with the digital cameras because I told the administrators, I said, this is the way things are going, like it or not. And so they need to learn this. And they allowed me to do that. But they had to go through the other process first. They had to learn the basics and the dark room, and then the special effects, and then they were able to do the digital and the Photoshop stuff.
Well, you know what's interesting about that too is all of Photoshop, all that digital stuff, all the language of it is still based on the old, uh, more traditional cameras,
Right,
f-stops and cameras and speeds and all that stuff.
right. And they're most of your better cameras are not fully automatic. They are made to where you can manipulate the shutter speed if you need to, or the depth of field, or whatever. But I really think it was from having a good grasp of those old Pentax K1000s, uh, and having to do it manually, and then they could decide whether they wanted to or not. But there's things that program and automatic don't get you the kind of picture that you want.
Well, right, because one of the things I remember you making that was really beautiful were these, extended, shutter, the open shutter over a long in a dark environment, and what you
Right.
get when you have that long shutter opening.
Right.
Right.
Do you remember the time that my students, okay, there was going to be a lot of meteor showers.
Right.
And so okay, this was an assignment. I went out myself. I stayed up all night and got meteor showers, and where everything, would circle around the North Star and all that kind of stuff. I told them all this information, and a lot of them actually did. Well, this one student came in, and when she came out of the dark room, she says, "I don't understand. What are all these squiggles everywhere? It wasn't supposed to be like this." And I said, "Did you use a tripod?" And she said, "No." And I had told them to use a pillow the hood of the car to keep their camera still. Well, what she had done is she put her head on the pillow, and she was holding the camera. She ended up getting all these squiggles and staying up all night. And the police even came out to where they were because somebody had reported that these kids were out there, in the middle of the night, and they were trying to take these pictures of all these meteors and all this stuff. And poor thing, all she got was squiggles.
Okay, I want to tell one last story about you and I as friends and teachers and having a good time. One of my favorite memories of all time has to do with Bitter Lake and you and I going out there. We went out there with our cameras. I think this was the first year you were teaching photography and you were doing all these things, these photographic things. And it was a really wet year, so there was a lot of water out at Bitter Lake. We went out there and we were by the water and we kept hearing fish jump. Do you remember this?
I do remember
And
that.
we kept going.
Trying to get the fish because after they jump, they're gone. You can't,
You
you
can't get. And then we got to this little gate and such bad girls we were. they had these little gates that they close in certain areas, and we just went, "Tick, tick, tick."
Oh, that's for cars. We could go in there.
We're on foot. We're walking around, and here comes this guy. Uh, you ladies are in an area where you're not supposed to be.
Did you see the sign?
Did you see this sign? Stay out.
Oh.
You're bothering the birds.
Yeah.
Oh, that was an awesome day. I don't think we either one got many good pictures, but man, we had a lot of fun. That was so much
Learned
fun.
a lot. You can't wait till the fish jump before you catch it. Doesn't
Yeah.
work. Even with the fast shutter speed. Oh,
Well, that is the perfect note to end on. What a strange interview this is, but I mean, I so appreciate you doing it. My plan is to do for my channel 312 episodes. Of those episodes, 52 will be interviews. So
lofty goal.
I know. And Sue, it was really a big blessing from God for me when you moved into the room next door. And I think if I hadn't had you as a friend, I might not have made it as a teacher, but you were absolutely one of the best friends I've ever had.
Thank you. I feel the same way.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye.
Uh-huh.
And I'll send you a text as soon as I'm done, and I'll send you a link to this interview too.
Okay.
I love you, Sue.
You too.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.